Amen. All right, if you've got a Bible, we're going to be in Luke chapter 15 today. That's a familiar passage for many of us. If you don't have a Bible, there's a Bible in the rack in front of you if you're in the room, or you can always get a Bible app online. You can join us that way too. I'm going to set these up. Some of you might be getting excited thinking, Jeff got a prophetic word about what the new Powerball lotto numbers are. That's not what this is, I promise. Sorry to disappoint, but these are going to be some important numbers to us later on in the message when we get going, so we'll just tease you with that. But for now, we're going to be in Luke chapter 15, and this passage, some have called it, a lot of theologians call it the Evangelium Evangelio, which means the gospel within the gospel. Yeah, maybe you've heard John 3:16 kind of described the same way. It's like the gospel in a nutshell. Like you can take everything that Jesus said and everything that Jesus is about and boil it down. For God so loved the world that he gave Jesus so that whoever believes on him won't perish. I mean, that's like the whole story in one verse. Well, this is kind of that as well. It's the Evangelium Evangelio. It's this idea, the whole gospel, the whole good news of Jesus down into one story that he shares just to share the Father's heart, to share what it's like to be part of his kingdom and what's required and all that, and who's invited. So really a special passage here. Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells three stories in response to some of the religious leaders of his day being critical. And just the Pharisees, some of the scribes, the Pharisees, the people who knew the scripture forwards and backwards. He's telling them stories to help them understand your heart is so off. You got it all here, but you're missing it completely here. And so we're going to pick it up in verse 11 in just a second, and that'll be on the screen in just a second, but this won't be on the screen, but I want to open up just the first two verses of Luke chapter 15, just to set the tone and the context for you. Now, tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were muttering, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." There's a couple things in here I want you to see. First of all, it says that phrase that they were all gathered around, the tax collectors and sinners, which in a lot of translations it'll put it in quotes because the idea is not Luke saying they're sinners, but they had been labeled sinners by some of the religious crowd. And Luke is like, well, these are the ones that they call them that, but in Jesus' world, they're friends. I mean, Jesus invites them in. And where you see that word gathered, they were all gathering around Jesus, a more accurate translation of that would be that they were pressing in or they were pressing near. So don't think about like we're scattered around in a room here or, in a stadium or something like that. It's more of, man, they were just pressed in as close as they could get physically in proximity to Jesus because there was something about him that drew them in. They wanted to make sure they could hear his words. They wanted to make sure they could experience his presence and his love. And the Pharisees know this because the Pharisees don't do this. They're grumbling and saying, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. We don't do that, says the religious Pharisees. And Jesus says, but I do. I welcome any and all to my table. And we'll say this over and over in the series when we're talking about welcome home and a seat at the table. This is not my table or our table. This is his table we're talking about. Welcome home to what he invites us to. And it's so clear in this passage, the invite was sent out to everybody. And a couple of things that are interesting, at the end of that verse 2, he eats with them. The accusation, the hurl, I can't believe Jesus is eating with them. That's an important thing. In the New Testament, it is amazing. If you just ever get a chance and do a study and walk through, my marker board is covered with some of this in my office right now, of all the different passages in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all the biographical accounts about Jesus' life, the number of times the table and table fellowship comes up. That's kind of the word that a lot of biblical scholars use, the table fellowship. There is something so powerful and something so special in our context and culture today, yes, but even more in first century Israel, how important it was. This table fellowship, it was an invitation of honor to be able to sit at the table with others, and it would involve peace, brotherhood, forgiveness, trust emerging. I mean, there's just deepened relationship that would take place there. So the Pharisees are saying, why? Why are they allowed here? And even bigger than that, they, meaning the tax collectors who were, committing extortion on people, they were cheats and lies, and sinners, you just kind of fill in the blank on what they were. Why were they allowed at the table? And even more than that, they say this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. He isn't just eating them, he's welcoming them. Which, take it further, what that means is he's the host of the party. Now, it may have been at Peter's house, or it may have been one of the disciples' house, or one of his followers, but Jesus, make no mistake, he's the master planner of it. He's got the food, the menu, the table set. He's got everybody, come on in, bring the party. He sent out the invitations. He put the party planners together, everything. He is welcoming them as the host. This makes no sense for a rabbi, a teacher of the ways of God, to be welcoming people in. At least that's what the Pharisees thought. Jesus knows this. He hears this. He overhears some of the conversations. Only so he goes into 3 stories. The evangeleo, the gospel in the gospel. And he talks about sheep. Let me give you some parables, some story. Number 1, there's a shepherd who has 100 sheep. One of them runs away. The shepherd will leave the 99 who don't need to be saved, and he will go and find that one, and there will be great rejoicing when he comes back. This is what the kingdom of God's like. He then tells a story about a woman who loses a coin. Man, this woman has 10 coins. She flips the house literally about upside down trying to find this coin, calls the neighbors, is up all night trying to find it. And when she finds the coin, there's great rejoicing. There's a celebration because what was lost is found. But then the climactic story that he tells, we sometimes call it the prodigal son story. Sometimes we call it the lost son story. It's this story that starts in verse 11 where Jesus talks about a father who has 2 sons. And we're going to pick it up in verse 11. It is just such a powerful story. And I will admittedly say this. I don't have the time and I don't have the skill, just honestly, I don't have the skill to unpack the beauty and the brilliance of what Jesus is saying in this passage. I encourage you, man, do any and every study you can on Luke 15, primarily on this story, because there is so much brilliance to Jesus' teaching here. And it's a familiar story. If you're like, oh yeah, I've heard the lost son, or I've heard the prodigal story. I'll try to walk you through some things that even I've picked up in the last few weeks in studying this that have just honestly led me to tears sitting in my desk in my office as I remember the beauty of what this means. It's just been so powerful for my heart, and that's really what I've been praying for this morning. Listen to it with new ears, see it with new eyes today. Okay? So we'll pick it up in verse 11. It says, Jesus continued with his 3rd story, and he says this, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me your share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Little nuggets here and there. First of all, it is virtually unheard of for a son, particularly in this culture, to make such a bold, horrible request. Give me half of your estate. Now, make no mistake, 2 sons, it's going to be divided equally, but what happens for that to take place? The father dies. And in essence, what the younger son is saying, I'm rid of you, and I'm ready for you to die. In fact, one of the authors, I was reading a commentary, I think his name is Kenneth Bailey, it's slipping me right now. It's like Poets and something. Oh, it's an amazing commentary, though. I'll post it on social media for you so you can see it if you have an interest. An amazing commentary or a biblical study on the book of Luke. And around this passage, this guy for 15 years has been just nuancing and studying Luke, just the book of Luke, and has written some amazing things. In it, he has asked hundreds and hundreds, he talks about in it, of people who still live in a similar kind of culture, from Turkey to Morocco to India, Iran, different places all over Middle Eastern and North Africa and India, in Asian areas, all these areas where there's a similar culture, where from family to family, large properties and large estates are passed down. Hundreds and hundreds, he said, he's asked him. And he said, what would happen if today even, let alone 2,000 years ago, if today some son would ask a father this? He said, there's never been an occurrence where they haven't said something like, he would be absolutely outcast and ostracized from the family and the village. We can't quite understand probably in our culture just how deep this is, that this son is making such an ugly, horrific, I'm ready for you to die, and I want what's coming to me. And that's the setting here. And any father throughout history would have just said, get out of my sight. And the village would tell them that as well. He's ostracizing him from it. But look at the response of the father. So the father, without any condemnation, divides his property between them. Well, I already know out the bat something's different here in Jesus' teaching. Not long after that, the younger son gets together all that he has and sets off for a distant country. And there he squanders his worth in wild living. Now, those of us who know the story tend to like to look at that last part of that verse. He spends it all on riotous living or wild living. It's one of those kind of let your mind or your imagination run wild for a second, and anything you can think of, he was probably doing it. It was just a grotesque life he was living, is kind of how it's postured in the original language here. We look at that, but don't get looking at that so much. Look at what was before. He takes everything he has and he goes to a distant country. Why does he do that? Because he has no ability at this point to set up shop anywhere nearby. Why? Because of what I was saying about what he just did to his father. You don't do this without the entire village, probably 300-400 people maybe, about this time. Like Nazareth had about 400 people during this time, so just think of a village like that. They're all aware of, are you kidding? He had the audacity, and the father just get out of town. We want nothing to do with you. Running for his life probably because of what he's just done. There is no invitation for him to be part of the community at this point. So he goes and finds another one. He goes on and says, after he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. And so he went and he hired himself out to another citizen of that country. He's got a new master now. He sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. The son longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. We will hire you to give this slop to feed the pigs. Oh, I would love to eat that slop. No. You're not worth it. The pigs are more important to us than you are. We won't give you the food to eat, but you can feed it to them. And he's just starving. What a horrible place he's finding himself in because of his rebellious, selfish act. And then this verse, praise God for this verse. When he came to his senses, he started to say to himself, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? Here I am, I'm starving to death. I will set out and I will go back to my father. And I will say to him, notice there's three things he's going to say to his father. Number one, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. Father, I have sinned, number one. Number two, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. I have lost that right. I'm no longer worthy. And number three, maybe, just maybe, I saw his grace before. I saw his kindness beyond understanding. Maybe he'll be kind enough to hire me back. Maybe I can earn my way back in and be a servant, like a slave almost to him, and try to pay my way to survive now. I've sinned against you. I've done wrong. I'm not worthy to be your son. Can I be your servant? Can I earn my way? Now, we're going to get into a couple cool verses here in just a second, but before we do, you got to know some context. Because this next scene is where the son comes back. He's rehearsed this speech. He's going to tell the father. The father is in the village still. The way I've always pictured this scene is like kind of like The Sound of Music, kind of a scene where they're out in the fields and there's harps in the background and they're just like, running towards each other, and it's this beautiful moment, and doves are hovering nearby. Besides that being disturbing, the reality is that is not what the scene would have been here. So here's the interesting thing about the scene. The scene is the father is not out in the fields. In first century Israel culture, Palestine culture, his house would have been in the village. And all the fields that he was the owner over are being worked by all of his servants. His brothers had been over all those servants and working the fields. The father would have been in probably a very prominent house in a village, 300-400 people. And he would be at this house in the middle of people, streets, roads, houses, looking down, markets, kids running around in the street, playing, and chickens running around. I mean, he's in with people, not out in the field. This changes everything. And let me tell you why. Because the son is coming back. The father is sipping tea or coffee or whatever they drank at the time. And he's looking out, and down the street at the end of the village with a bunch of people in between, and families and kids and men and others who knew what this son had done, how this son had unbelievably rejected the father, had been just blatantly dishonoring to him, and had kicked him out of town to where he had to go somewhere else. The father will see the son with all the village around, not just an empty field. And he realizes that in order for that son to get to, oh my goodness, there's my son. It's happened. Has he been looking every day for him? Maybe. Read between the lines, you get the idea that it didn't, from a long way off, he saw his son. And through the village and through the people, he makes out, no matter how many people he's looking at, he makes out the one. And he has a choice and a decision right there. And he knows he could kind of go back over the table and, here comes Johnny come lately. Come tell your old man what you did wrong. Got something to say, son? It's probably what I'd probably want to do. He could say, a little nod of the head. You're welcome. I'll summon you. I'll give you permission. He could tell his servants to go out and tell him, don't come anywhere near me. He could stand there and wait for the son to approach him. He could walk to the son if he wants to walk to the son. He could jog to the son. The scripture says that through this gauntlet, through this mess, he just flat out sprints to his son. He runs to his son as soon as he sets eyes on him. And he does what the son could not do. What do I mean by that? This is a gauntlet. This son who not only rejected the father, but also rejected this village, is going to come back and he's going to face ridicule and shame, and he knows it. He's going to come in and he's going to have songs of taunt, songs of mockery, words of rebuke. People will probably pick up rocks and stones and throw them at him. He may get kicked. He may get killed. He may not survive this. And the only way that that son is ever going to get through this gauntlet, listen, is if the father runs before he even starts. Runs before he even starts and gets to that son before he gets to that gauntlet. And he does what the son cannot do for himself. The gospel in the gospels. He goes and it says that the father doesn't say one single word to his son. Look what it says in the next verse. When he, the son, was a long way off, his father saw him and he was filled with compassion. So he runs to his son and he throws his arms around him and he kisses him. Don't miss how powerful this is. I mean, there's so many levels. That son makes any effort to come through, even in humility, even in brokenness, even in awareness, trying to earn his way back to the father. He will not make it. They will stop him. And the father, in front of everybody who knows he was shamed, who knows he was humiliated by his son, pays the price, walks right through all of it and says, I embrace him, I accept him, and you can as well. He walks up to him and it says in here that he kisses him after he embraces him, kisses him on the cheek. Check this out. This son has already rehearsed his speech. He knows what he's going to do with the father. There's no doubt that he wouldn't have the audacity. I've sinned against you. I'm not worthy to be your son. Make me your servant. The son is probably going to kiss the father, but do you know where he'll kiss the father? Probably on his hand, as a servant would. Probably on his feet, as a servant who had betrayed him would. The father won't let him do that. The father runs and kisses him on the cheek and embraces him as family, embraces him as royalty. It's powerful. It's beautiful. It's the gospel. It's the good news of what Jesus has done for us. Right in the middle of that street, look what's happening. Then the father, he hasn't said a word to him. He doesn't say, you stink to high heaven. You need to go get a bath. You need to get cleaned up. You need to change your clothes before you're ever going to be welcome back. He doesn't tell him anything. You know who he starts to talk to? Oh, wait a second. We missed what the son says. The son said something first. The son says to him, again, he hasn't said a word verbally, the father has he? But boy, he has said everything, hasn't he? And the whole village, everybody is watching this, just dumbfounded, dropping their coffee on the ground, just like, what is happening? They're seeing an expression of love that wins, of grace that wins in a way that they have never seen before. The son's only response, the son says to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. What did he leave out this time? Remember the three things the son had rehearsed? I've sinned against you. I'm not worthy to be your son. Do you have just enough in you to make me your servant? He doesn't say that this time, does he? Why? Because he realizes that he cannot earn what he has just experienced. You can't get a paycheck. You can't get, yeah, I about tripped. I saw somebody over there laugh and it distracted. Was that you? I saw you. Had a nice trip. It's a risk anytime you're going to do that. He cannot pay for what he has just experienced. It's already been paid for. And maybe, just maybe, because of the love and the grace that he just saw in the Father, is it possible that I failed, I sinned against you, I'm not worthy to be your son, but would you accept me as your son? And look at the father's response. Do you have a better way for me? Do you have something that I wouldn't even be willing to ask for, but you've already begun to offer? Now you see what the father has to say to the son. Father says to the servants, quickly bring the best robe, put it on him, Bring the ring and put it on his finger. Put sandals on his feet. Listen, 3 things that he brings, and every one of them have massive symbolism. Bring the best robe. Father's house, a lot of servants, a lot of everything. Who had the best robe in the house? Not a trick question. The Father. Bring my robe. Let me tell you what his identity is. He's mine. And everything that I am and everything that I have is his. But don't you remember? I do, but I'm not thinking about right now, because my son who was dead is now alive, who was lost is now found. Get out of the way. Doesn't he got to get cleaned up before he gets thrown? Just bring the robe. He's come home. Welcome him home to the table. And then he says, put a ring on his finger. Put a ring, and no doubt, every theologian I read on this, every Bible scholar believes it was a signet ring, which means it bore the symbol, like kings would have, that they would put in wax and put their symbol on there as a seal. It was a signet ring. And what that means is there is enormous trust. Put it on his hand, the way he betrayed me before. Yeah, he's my family. I'm not treating him like a servant. I'm treating him like family, like royalty now. Enormous trust. All authority that I have is now his again. And then the third thing, put sandals on his feet. This is not a servant. This is a free man. Put the shoes of free men on this man's feet. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And we have been set free for freedom's sake so that we can set others free. Let this man, he is my identity. He has my authority. He has freedom that he could only experience by being included in my party. And he's doing this right in the middle of a crowd that is jaw-dropped, blown away, that they're seeing love and grace win. Bring the fatted calf that we only bring out when like a governor comes through, or maybe a massive wedding of one of my boys. Bring that one, the one that we've been fattening up for a celebration like this. Some theologians would say, was he fattening the calf because he just knew he was going to come home? I know you're going to come home. I've been watching for you. Get that calf. It's happening. Get it out. It's ready. Let's do this. He doesn't pull out a goat. He doesn't pull out a lamb. He pulls out the big fatted calf. Probably 100 to 150 people are necessary to be at this party, this celebration, or else it's all going to spoil. He's bringing as much of the village as he possibly can. And why? It says it in the verse there. My son who was dead is alive again. The one who was lost is found. So they began to celebrate. And it's amazing when we think about the fact that this son who did nothing but reject, nothing but humiliate, nothing but run and waste what he had been given, is welcomed back to the table. Not as a servant. Put a robe on him. Whose? Mine. The best I've got. Put a ring on him. What kind of ring? That ring? All authority, Jesus says, that was given to me, I give to you. Man, put shoes on him. The little booty kind of shoes of his leg. No, like sandals. I put him. He's a free man. He's part of my family. He will not be a servant. He can't earn what I'm doing for him. He can only receive it. He can only pull out a chair and be a part of the table again. Oh, it's beautiful. It's the gospel. It's what Jesus has done for us, friends. And you may be hearing this maybe in a new way today, online, in the room. That is as clear of a message as what Jesus has done for us. Every one of us, the scripture tells us, run. We run away from God. We chase our own desires. We waste our life. He's put so much in front of us, but we do our own thing. And then by God's grace, when we come to our senses, as it said in verse 15, when he came to his senses, he said, wait, there's a better way. And the only thing I can come up with is, I'm not worthy. I've sinned. I can't. Maybe I can earn my way back in. Maybe he'll let me work as a servant. And Jesus has none of it. He looks at the gauntlet we'd have to run through, or the boxes we'd have to check, or all the righteous things that we'd have to do to try to earn that holiness and that perfection. And he says, there's no way you can do it. Only I can do it for you. And before you take the first step, he just runs, not walks. But when you make that turn and you begin to acknowledge and you're returning to him, he's right there, embracing you, kissing you on the cheek. By the way, that kissing him on the cheek, in the original Greek, it's the idea that he was kissing him over and over on the cheek. This was not just a nice greeting, a pleasantry of giving a kiss. It's just the affection of, I love you. You smell like the filth you've lived in. The last time you looked at me, you betrayed me. But I love you. I embrace you. You haven't said a word to me yet. I embrace you and I love you because I know your heart has turned to me. The story doesn't end there, though. That's all exciting. That all makes my heart beat fast. What makes my heart cringe is what follows. Because there's too many times in my life that I can relate to what the next scene is, and maybe you can as well. And it's what we got to wrestle with. Those of us who have been at the table maybe for a while. Those of us have been home and we're like, man, I got a cozy big recliner at the table. I know my seat. I'm eating good. I love this. I can't believe what I get to experience because I'm part of the family of God. Woo! Wait a second. You're not letting him in, are you? Wait a second. He's not clean. Wait a second. They haven't kind of confessed or explained why they or where they were. Or wait a second. You don't know the skeletons in that story. Wait a second. This is the story of the people that are already at the table that are having a hard time welcoming more to the table. Look what happens, and it's the older brother. Look what the older brother does. Remember, the father had 2 sons, divided everything between the 2. One runs off, the other one stayed. By the way, we have no record of the other brother saying, that ain't right. We have no record of the other brother saying, that's my brother. I need to go find him. I need to bring him home. We have no record of any of that in here. Jesus tells a story that the older brother looks like this. Meanwhile, verse, I think it's 25, the older son was in the field, and when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. Something exciting's happening. So he called one of the servants and asked, what was going on? I'm ready to party. And here's what he hears. Your brother has come home. And your father has killed the fatted calf because he has come back safe and sound. That's all the brother gets. Your brother who was lost has come home and he's safe. And your dad is ready to celebrate it. What's the son's response? The older brother became angry and he refused to go in. So his father, for the second time in the same day, goes out and meets his son where he is. Don't lose sight of that. I'll meet you right on the edge when you turn to me. I'll embrace you. I'll give you all the love you need, all the acceptance you need. He goes out now to his other son. His father went out and he pleaded with his son. But the son answered the father, look. By the way, just a disrespectful response. No honor like father or anything. Just a disrespectful look like he's a peer. Even the son who went off and wasted his life, every time in the story refers to his dad as father. Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a goat so I could celebrate with my friends. So much even in that statement there I just don't have time for. Basically, I've replaced you with other people that I want to be with. I just want to be with the people that I enjoy. I don't want to celebrate this idiot that ran off. I don't even want to hang out with you if you're going to hang out with him. You haven't even given me anything that I can go celebrate with my friends. And I've been faithful, and I've never disobeyed you. And I'm pretty self-righteous in this moment, but I don't even see it. The father's response is just so powerful. Oh, I'm sorry, but when the son of yours has squandered your property with prostitutes, by the way, first time that appears in the passage, if that was true and the older son knew this, why is there no indication that he went chasing after a brother who had fallen? A brother who probably never felt worthy, never felt welcomed again. Why didn't he go and find him? And if it's not true, he's just slandering and talking ill of him, but he's gone and trying to build his narrative. He's wasted your property with prostitutes. He comes home, and now you kill the fatted calf for him. Look at the father's heart again. My son, the father said, you are always with me. You say I don't give you a goat? You've got me. I'm with you. We're family. You're my son. You're always with me, and everything I have is yours, including the fatted calf. Everything is yours. And that's not enough. Everything is yours, but we have to celebrate and we have to be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is now alive. He was lost and is now found. Question we have today, kind of application time, and I'll start leading towards the end here. Which heartbeat do you reflect? Do you reflect the heartbeat of the Father, or do you reflect the heart of the Son? Which heart posture do you have? When you look at those who have failed or who've been on the outside or don't feel welcome or don't feel wanted, which one do you reflect more of? The Father with the grace and the welcoming and put the robe on, the ring on his finger, the shoes, all the identity, all the authority. Which one, if you're a follower of Jesus and you've been sitting at the table for a while and you've gotten pretty cozy at it, which one do you reflect the most? The Father or the Son, the older son? There's a way we can kind of answer it, and it brings us to these numbers. Because Jesus is teaching Pharisees, religious people during his day, these stories in a painful way, a painful reality, to help them understand this is what I want for you. I've modeled it for you. I'm a host of a party where all are welcome at the table, but you're still not getting it. So this is what I want for you. Let me explain it to you. Don't be this older brother. Be something different. Jesus wants that for the people of his day. He wants that for us as well. If you claim to be somebody who lives a life centered on Jesus, or you want to know what it means to be centered on Jesus, what does this mean for today? Well, let's answer it this way. Who are the lost sons and who are the lost daughters of today? Who are the ones that when they look at the table or when they're standing on the outside of the village and they know what's ahead or the challenges or the battles that they face, that too often, sometimes they see people of faith standing in the way. It's not the father that they're concerned about. It's the people in the village. Will they accept him? Is there a seat at the table for me? And I don't see that right now. Who are the people today that don't feel welcomed, don't feel worthy, sometimes don't even feel wanted? So here's where these numbers come in. I've been reading a book, and I've read it through like 2 times now. It's called Us Versus Us. And it's by an author named Andrew Marin, M-A-R-I-N. If you want to read this, I'm telling you, I'll buy a copy for you if you want to. I'm not kidding. It is such a powerful book if you are particularly compassionate about and want to learn about this topic. How does the church respond to the LGBT community? Because let's be honest, we are not good at knowing how to do that. Now, I'm telling you, the Bible is our roadmap. We want to let it guide our life and all, but there's so much in here, and trying to navigate through what that means and the paradox and the tension and what it means to do the Jesus way, welcoming any and all. Shoot, 3 weeks ago, I'm talking up here, and he's got a prostitute washing his feet in every seat. He's got a Roman centurion whose servant is sick. If you were here, you remember this. That Roman centurion is probably part of the legion that's going to be part of crucifying Jesus. You realize that? And he receives them at the table. Jesus welcomed all to the table, to the story, because he knew that if they got close to him, they just might be set free. They just might get that robe on. They just might get that ring on the finger. They just might be part of his story. So come as close as you can to me, because you just might be changed. How does the church today do that when it comes to the LGBT community first? These numbers, this blows my mind. It's in this book, Us Versus Us. 86% of people who, over 20,000 respondents, by the way, massive survey. Nothing's been done like this before. I'm telling you, it's an amazing book. 86% of people who identify in the LGBT community today grew up in a community of faith. 86% of them. 54% of them leave their faith after the age of 18. 54% of them walk away with no intention of ever coming back. That just crushes me. It kills me, because if there's any place that can give us life and hope and love and show the Jesus way, it doggone ought to be here. It ought to be the people of faith. It ought to be the church, and they're not finding it here. They're finding too many older brothers, and sometimes I'm the older brother on that one. And this number here is the most mind-boggling of all. So Barna did some of these numbers and stuff with this book, Us Versus Us. Listen to this. General population. Pause this just for a second. General population, people who leave the faith after the age of 18. Mom and dad made me go to church, or I don't care anymore, it doesn't make sense, whatever it is. After the age of 18, 9% of the general population indicate that they would be open to someday returning to church. 9%. In the LGBT community, 76% of those that left the faith after the age of 18 indicate that if there was a seat somehow for them at the table, if they felt loved, if they had patience, if people would hear their story and not just condemn them, they even indicated over and over, it's not even a matter of changing your belief systems or what you hold or whatever, but if you would just let me be part of the table, let me be part of the story somehow, 76% indicate they would be interested in returning to the church. And the words were this, that they would be interested in returning to the community and the practices of the faith community. I don't know all the answers to this. I don't know how to do all of this. I just know we've got to wrestle with that. Because we're asking the question, who are the lost sons and daughters of today? It's those who don't feel welcome, don't feel wanted, don't feel worthy at the church. And friends, this is a big category in it. We got to wrestle with it today. And I'm telling you, if you are listening online or you're in here and you identify with this group, or you have a family member that identifies with this group, I want to make myself available. I want to understand. I want to listen. I want to learn. I've got 3 people already. We did the My Story thing a few weeks ago where share, what you've walked through, and maybe you're even afraid to share sometimes. And 3 different stories have come up that over the next couple of weeks I'm going to be sitting down and talking with. I'm just trying to understand, how do we not be the older brother? How do we have the heart of the Father? How do we be what the Pharisees would accuse? That church sits with anybody and everybody and welcomes and hosts them in. Something different about that place. How do we do that? I don't know the answers, but let's figure it out together. Let's at least walk in it and feel that together. This one. Another group that feels unwelcomed or unwanted sometimes, or that there's not a seat for them, is adults who are single. Whole different arena, whole different topic, but adults who are single. Across the U.S., 40% of adults 18 and over are single, whether they've never been married, whether they've been divorced or they're separated, or they're widowed or something else. They are single. 40%, 4 out of every 10 adults across our country are single. Well, that's nationwide, Jeff. What's local? Well, you can see where this is going. Jefferson County, I looked up the stats, and it was from about 5 years ago, is the most recent numbers. 47% of the adults, almost 1 out of every 2 adults that you pass in Jefferson County is single for all different reasons. And in Denver County, you go back into the hub of the city, 59%, over half, 6 out of 10 adults that you pass are single. And I would ask you, and we already know the answer, is that proportionately represented in our churches today? Not this one, and not a lot of churches in the area that I'm aware of. And I don't know the answers. I don't know how to do all this. I'm just being honest with you. I've been married for 2.5 decades now to a beautiful wife that I adore. And so with 2 kids, so a lot of my rhythms kind of build around what that means, a family unit thing. But my heart is beating fast trying to figure out, how does roughly half of the people around me know that there is a seat at the table? And it's not just a seat over there. There's a seat right here at the table for you. You are part of our family. You are part of his family. It's his table. And we just want to let you know that the gauntlet's already been run. He's already paid the way. All you need to do is turn, pull up a seat, and know that you're part of this story with us. How do we do that? I don't know. There's a lot of unresolved in this message. But we got to work through this and wrestle through this together. This is what it means to be a church that welcomes people home. This one, real quick. If you are in a family that has a family member that has a learning disability or a physical disability, you are 2 times as likely to not be engaged or involved in a faith community. Twice as likely. The odds are that you're not going to find a place because you don't. There was an actual article that really fed this. There's a guy who's a writer for the Washington Post. He does the religious section. He was experiencing this in a church in Washington, D.C. Couldn't believe that. Thought, man, if there's any place that people, even with disabilities, are trying to figure out where they're welcomed home, the number should be flipped upside down. You're 10 times as likely to be going to church because you know there's a seat at the table no matter what the story is. But it was the opposite. He went on a 2-year process of trying to look at all churches across the country, and the statistics kept coming back in that you're twice as likely not to engage in a church if you have a disabled child or a disabled family member, whether it's learning disabilities or physical or emotional disabilities and all that. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know what to do with that. It's near to my heart, as you would know in our story. But we got to think about that. We got to figure that out. How many families are feeling like, I'm not welcomed, I'm not worthy, there's not a seat, I don't know where I belong in that. This one here, this is going to bother some of you, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm going to explain it, and I hope you're going to track with me on it. Some of you get bothered sometimes about whether I do or don't say, or others that have left our church over the last 12 months about what I do or don't say related to politics and different positions and different allegiances on different sides of the aisles. Can I explain to you part of the reason why I don't? Because of these numbers right here. 2018, the most recent statistics that we have for the population, this is nationwide, but the number of Christians, this top line, Christians who voted Republican or identified themselves as Christian was 58%. Identified themselves as Democrat and voted Democrat, Christians, 42%. So if you want me to take an allegiance or a side, which side do you want me to eliminate? Which side do you want me to tell doesn't have a seat in here? Because I've told you before, and I'll say it again, I don't have an allegiance to a donkey or to an elephant. My allegiance is to a slain lamb, to the Lion of Judah. That is what we're about here. And we've had different people, and you're friends with some of them, that have left our church for different reasons that are related to that. I unapologetically will tell you, I love that some of you are confused. Where does Jeff land? It doesn't matter. My flag isn't for a party. My flag is Jesus. And on both sides, am I Democrat? Am I Republican? Yes and yes. I'm Jesus is what I want to be. Because I think you have to figure out how to do both of these. Even bigger than that, that's huge. These are people of faith, Republican, Democrat. This number keeps me up at night. This number, irreligious. I don't identify with any type of faith community. 28% voted Republican, 72% voted Democrat. What do you want to do with that? Why don't you tell your friends who get really frustrated or really disappointed and let you know that, tell them this is why we don't have an allegiance to a party. We have an allegiance to a king. We are not led by a president. We are led by a King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And it doesn't matter which party is in office. The Father says, I'm always with you. Everything I have is yours. Man, come on, you've got a seat at the table. And we got to welcome those on any of these lines, in any of these numbers. We got to welcome back to the family because there's a seat. Pull up his clothes, gather around, press close to Jesus with us because he just might impact your life and you might find his way is a better way. Yes, I have energy and passion in this because I think the church has been so duped by the cunning craftiness of the enemy in the last 18 months in particular that we get so bent out of shape about things that are temporary that we forget what is eternal. And God is calling us back to this, friends. There are empty seats around the table that need to be filled, and it doesn't have to do with where they check a box on a political party. It has to do with whether they're willing and ready to run down a gauntlet that they're not going to survive, but Jesus says, I've already done it for you. That's what we're about. Two more. This question mark. I can't find the stats, but this is a massive category. Massive. This category of question mark is all the people that probably fit some of the prodigal son story. The people that because of blemishes in their life, maybe it's an addiction to alcohol, maybe it's an addiction to pornography, maybe it's infidelity and affairs they've had in life. Maybe it's the scarlet letters they carry, whether it's divorce, whether it's being cheated on, whether it's whatever the story is, on and on, all those statistics, that group of people that don't feel like they're worthy. They just don't feel like they're worthy to sit at the table, and they're everywhere. They're you, they're me, they're around us. And they need to know somehow we've got to be better at this. I don't know how. I don't know the answers. Can we lean in together and figure it out? Because, man, every story matters. No matter who you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what's happened to you, there is a seat at the table for you. It's what we're about here at Mosaic. It's what we mean when we talk about a church. One of our core values is what we're talking about this series, welcome home. And we can bring that up on the screen for me. What the value of welcome home, what it really means. If we can bring that up, Christine, I went out of order on her, I'm sorry. There we go. The way of Jesus is a family where all are welcome, and there's always a place for everyone at a table. It's got to be more than something we talk about on a weekend. It's got to be more than something we have on the wall. It's got to be more than something that we just talk about in this room. We have to figure out how people of faith run down the aisles looking for people, ripping off the roof, letting people know what you're looking for, the better way. It's the Jesus way, and there is a place for you here, and you could be part of this family. There's been a lot of people lately who have taken that step of faith and have gone and set themselves and come to and they've been like, I know, I came to my senses. I know that my ways aren't working and nothing else has worked and there's no life and no hope found anywhere else. I've sinned. I'm not worthy to be a son anymore. I'm not worthy to be a daughter anymore. Maybe I can earn my way back. And Jesus says, no, you can't. You can't run this gauntlet. You won't survive. You won't make it back to me. I'll run to you instead. I've paid the price. And they've realized that. Bunch of people over the last few months, somewhere upwards of 50-ish people have given their life to Jesus through our church and have come and found that the seat at the table is for them as well. And I want to put this out here because we're going to have a baptism in 2 weeks. And if you're one of those people online, in the room, or you know of one of them, students, kids even, online there's been like 8 people since February 1st that have given their life to Jesus. come in and be baptized with us. If you want to know more about that or how to be a part of that, how to register, you can do that at Connection Point, or I think there'll be a slide on there. You can see the graphic on there. But 2 weeks from now, we are going to celebrate, as the Father tells us in this passage, that which was dead is now alive, that which was lost is now found. And we're going to celebrate that together in 2 weeks. Some of you are probably bothered, as I would be. He missed a number, and by the way, it's a whole different color. I'm going to finish up on this, and then we're going to receive communion this morning. It just felt like the right thing that we need to do today. This one here looks different because I want to tell you a little story about a bus and what it has to do with this. Our daughter Lauren has special needs. She was born with epilepsy, different challenges that we've navigated through a lot of years. She is right down here to wave for people. She is officially the CEO of our church, which is our chief encouragement officer. And man, she fits that to the bill. She knows her role description and nails it. And our team loves her and we love her. Lauren, with some of her challenges when we were back east, schools have a hard time being able to meet all the needs and in general population schools. And so we were having to split her between 2 schools that were about 15 minutes apart, where in the morning she'd go to one, in the afternoon she'd go to the other for some of the different type of classes and groups that she would be in for special needs. And so Leslie and I were back and forth, trying to figure out how to do this, fit the schedule. It's just becoming a challenge until, check this out, the school district decided and said, we are going to provide transportation for Lauren to get back and forth from school to school. But here's how they did this. This was hilarious, and I just absolutely loved it. They pulled up a 72-passenger school bus for 1 passenger. One of those big, brand new, beautiful 72-passenger school bus with Buddy the driver on it, Lauren's aide who would go back and forth to transport, and Lauren Bell, the whole bus, taking up a lane down the highway going from school to school, 72-passenger for 1 person. And tell me that's not the gospel. That whatever the cost would be, wherever you're in these numbers, or maybe you're like me. I don't really fit any of these numbers except for the special needs family. I don't fit a lot of this story. You know what story I fit? I fit that stupid older brother story. I'm so self-righteous sometimes. I've had marks of pride in my life, marks of control and power, and I'm a recovering Pharisee, as maybe some of you have heard. I'm what the older brother's like, all my life I've been obeying, I've been slaving for you. Come on, where's it at? I'm one of those 99 sheep that Jesus leaves behind to go find the 99 who don't need repentance. I'm the Pharisee in Luke chapter 18, a few chapters later, where Jesus will talk about the Pharisee in the corner. Look it up. And the Pharisee's like, I'm glad I'm not like this one over here. I fast, I do the right things, and I'm not a sinner like he is. And the story is really clear which one the Father really receives. I find myself on that. And the reality is, if I was the only one, he would run that gauntlet. He would do it for me. And I want to tell you this. So this whole story of the whole table, which, man, I'm just loving it. It's just so near to my heart. But it probably hasn't been lost on you that all the chairs are different. All different colors, all different sizes, because we come in all different colors, all different sizes, all different stories, nicks and bruises and bumps and repairs and everything on them. Every week we're kind of mixing up the order because there's no favored seat at the table when it's his table. We just can't believe we get to be a part of it. And we all get to be a part of this family. But I wanted this chair to be part of the table because I liked it. It was yellow. This actually sits on our front porch at home. A few years ago, I picked it up on somebody's side of the road, and I was like, ooh, I'll have some fun with it, a little do-it-yourself thing, right? And it's been on the front porch. Well, we face west, and the sun has just cracked it out. I don't know if you can see this on there, but the big old crack in the middle there. And I'm like, well, shoot, we can't sit there. We can't have somebody sitting on this while we're, doing, or me, for example, it mixes around. And I thought, well, it can't be at the table. I thought, what are we talking about? This is the most important chair at the table, friends. Because this chair right here actually represents every one of us. We are absolutely broken. I don't care who your story, if you're the older brother, the younger brother, if you're a statistic on one of these lists, if you're the Pharisee or the religious leader sitting there complaining about Jesus, if you're the older brother in the field fighting for your rights and really frustrated with God and trying to defend what's yours, or if you're the brother who's a long way off and is just like, I'm not worthy, every one of us is this broken chair. It's what it says in 1 Timothy chapter 1 where Paul says, this is a beautiful statement and worthy of all being accepted. Jesus Christ came to save sinners. And Paul says, of whom I'm chief. I'm the number one sinner. I'm the most broken person at the table, Paul says. And until we have that posture, I'm not sure we really have pulled ourselves up to the table fully. And I think this chair is important. And It reminds me of a quote that I heard again just in the last couple of weeks. I can't remember the guy's name. It'll come up on the screen. He's a pastor in Sri Lanka, passed away a number of years ago. But it's this quote that we are just one beggar leading another beggar to where we found bread. Is it up there? Yeah. Christianity is just one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. Yeah, D.T. Niles. He's a pastor, or was a pastor in Sri Lanka. That's what Christianity is. Christianity is just realizing that somehow I was welcomed to this table and I was fed the bread of life. I drank from the living water. And all I want to do is give my life to say there are other beggars. I'm a beggar still. I'm a broken person, and I just want to let people know where they can find bread, where they can find healing, where they can find wholeness, where they can find a seat in his story. A couple years before she died, Rachel Held Evans wrote a bunch of books, amazing writer. And I'm going to end with this quote because it captures it so well. The gospel doesn't need a coalition devoted to keeping the wrong people out. It needs a family of sinners saved by grace, committed to tearing down the walls, throwing open the doors and shouting, welcome. There's bread and there's wine. Come and eat with us and talk. This isn't a kingdom for the worthy. This isn't a table for the worthy. This is a table for the broken. This is a table and a kingdom for the hungry. She goes on, that's what God's kingdom is like. It's a bunch of outcasts and oddballs gathered at a table, not because you're rich, not because you're worthy, not because you tried to run the gauntlet, not because you paid your way in, not because you're entitled, none of that. You're not here because of that, but because you were hungry and you were a beggar looking for bread and you found it. You were hungry and you said yes. And there's always room for more. There's always room for more at the table. That's my life. That's my story. I was hungry. Couldn't find satisfaction for that anywhere else except for through Jesus. I was thirsty. Couldn't find that thirst quenched anywhere else other than Jesus. And so I said yes. And for the rest of my life, I just want to do all I can to help other people see that there's a seed for them and that they too can say yes. It's your story as well.